Hey, everybody. Hope and pray that you're doing well today as we come to our word from the Word. And today, that word is snare. Snare. Now, that picture there is more like a bear trap than a snare, but still, you get the idea. It's interesting. I ran across J. Vernon McGee had told a story of a little boy. His mom heard him. He was in the pantry and she heard a noise, and it's because he had reached up and got the cookie jar down, and so she goes in, opens up the pantry door, and says, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm fighting temptation." Well, isn't that what we all tend to do from time to time? We kind of continue to inch our way further and further and further into bad situations, and then say, "You know what? I'm fighting temptation." When to really fight temptation would have never been to open that door to the pantry in the first place. So as Paul is going through First Corinthians chapter 10, he is giving them examples to the Corinthian church, saying, "Look, y'all need to remember that you're uh, still talking about the relationship with other believers, and even still dealing with their meals and these feasts that were tied to idolatry." And so he gives Israel as an example. He says, "Look, you can go back and look in Israel's history, and you can see that things didn't always turn out well when they turned against God, when they didn't fight off those temptations like they should have, and they gave themselves over to idolatry and gave themselves over to sexual immorality, and the list goes on. And so you'll see how many, he says, 23,000 in a night died, and it's all because of the judgment of the Lord. So, but he says all that, and then he says, "But I don't want you to think that that part is inevitable." He said, "But you need to be cautious." Verse 12 tells us, to take heed if you that you stand, lest you fall. That same idea that pride comes before destruction. And he follows it up with verse 13 that says this: "No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it." Be honest, out of all of the scriptures that we have, at least me personally, I believe I've heard this one used out of context more than any other. And what it is that people will take that and say, "Well, God won't give you more than you can bear," and they don't put it in with temptations; they just put it into life in general. Well, if you hear that as an unbeliever or even as a new believer, that someone says, "Well, God won't give you more than you can bear." Well, what about the sickness of a loved one? What about the death of a loved one? What about extreme financial, burdens, things like that, extreme trials and valleys? And you say, "I can't handle this on my own." By all means, God gives us more than we can handle, because he doesn't want us to handle it. He wants us to cast our burdens upon him and give it to him, let him carry it. So yes, God does allow us to face things that are more than we can bear. The context of the verse and the context of what he's talking about and the true application of it is the temptations that we face. See, God won't allow us to be tempted beyond what we are able to say no to. And you look back in the times that you and I, the times that we have fallen into temptation and gotten away, we have gone against that still small voice that said, "Don't do that." We've gone against that still small voice that said, "Is that the best thing to do?" We've all done it because we're all sinners. Now, that's not an excuse. That's a reason, but it certainly is not excusable. So we need to make it right and get back right with God. But the encouragement that he's also giving them, and the encouragement that you and I should take from it today, is to know that no matter what we're tempted to do, God is faithful and he always has a way out. Now, like I gave in that story, sometimes that way out of the temptation is not to get in there in the first place. But even then, even as many times as we have found ourselves smack dab in the middle of bad decisions, God still allows us a way out. But let me be completely honest and transparent. The way out is Jesus every single time. That doesn't mean that no consequences will be faced because of the temptation and what we may have fallen, what we have done in that temptation. Doesn't mean we won't have to face consequences. Don't mean any of that. What it means is that He will be the way out. And we don't have to feel like we're the only ones that have ever faced that temptation ever. That's why He says it's such as common to man. In other words, there's somebody else that's faced the same thing. You go throughout Israel's history, go throughout mankind's history, go throughout the history of the Bible. What have they been tempted to do? The same things that you and I have been tempted to do. It may have looked a little different. Sure, they didn't have technology, right? That they were tempted to so quickly that we could look at images that we shouldn't look at, be involved in relationships we shouldn't be involved in, and the list goes on, right? And just because now it may be that close to you, doesn't mean that it wasn't still the exact same thing in the garden. Because if you remember, the temptation there in the garden was first to get them to doubt the word of God. Did God really say? And then all of a sudden you find out that Adam, even knowing what was wrong, still chose. He didn't choose the path of God, he chose his own path. And every man and woman born since has had problems with temptation. But it doesn't have to be a snare that traps us. It can be something that we can see and we can sidestep if we take the path of God. So today, when you're facing temptation, and it's coming, it's not if, but when you face temptation, don't look to yourself. Don't even look to others. Look to God and God alone. God bless you, and I pray you have a great, great day.